All right, guys, look who's back. One half of MK, always making it look too easy. Let's go tip to tip with the BBC himself, with that BDE, Big Brian Campbell. BBC, welcome back to Submission Radio, my friends.
Fired up, I'm pretty big in Australia, so any time I can connect with my fellow Perthians out there on the West Rim, I'm fired up. All right.
Hey, brother, with the right pills, we're big everywhere, and they're always big when you're here on Submission Radio, man. So much to talk about, so much news. We've got the International Fight Week as well, boxing. There's stuff in boxing, so I appreciate you joining me during a crazy, busy week for Morning Combat. Let's go into the whole Jon Jones situation, right? We've been speaking about it. You and Luke did a fantastic, beautiful episode of Morning Combat, but it's always beautiful. It's always fantastic. I don't need to be saying that. Ariel Helwani putting out some new information from Jon Jones's lawyer about the new criminal charge, or the charge that's come out. I don't know if you saw it. Jon Jones' lawyer stunned by the Albuquerque Police Department's decision to charge him in this new case. Based on the criminal complaint, looked like they went so far as to seek a warrant for Jon's cell phone. He's never heard of such a crazy thing. The police is apparently targeting Jon for improper purpose. What was your reaction when you saw Jon's lawyer sort of weighing in here?
I mean, look, it's just a misdemeanor charge against Jon. There's weird elements to it why this incident would happen in February, but only come to light in June. And obviously the timing here of Jon's retirement, and then like 15 minutes later, the report drops, is interesting. Look, Jon does not, unfortunately for him, I don't know if we fully owe him any level of a benefit of the doubt, right? So it's like you hear a headline, and like you see a headline like this, you hear yet another transgression for Jon, and you just automatically go, yep, I believe that. Now, Jon has denied it, his lawyer has as well, and certainly the justice system should ultimately take care of that. But could you have mapped out a more disappointing situation than going through the multi-year drama of the build to the Aspinall fight that never happened? And then not only do we get an abrupt Jon Jones retirement, we get another messy accusation on top of it. I said it on Morning Combat, and everyone said it basically in their own form of texts or IG posts. This is the most Jon Jones way that the great Jon Jones could have ended probably the greatest career in this sport's history. And all you can do is shake your damn head, because it's like the legal side of it. I'm not even over the fact that we're not getting the Aspinall fight right now. All right. So it's like the legal side of it to me is like, hold up, we'll get to that. Can we just talk about the fact that this fight's not going to happen? What are we doing here in 2025 UFC?
Dude, we're going to talk about that in a second. But like you mentioned, just the whole thing, how it came together. Our buddy Ariel Helwani broke down. And I apologize, this cold is just not going away. But Ariel Helwani broke down how this case even came out. Have a look at this. This is a crazy, crazy story.
Of the Albuquerque Journal. And I said, hey, because what I thought was they reached out to the UFC for comment. The UFC catches wind of the news. This happened in February, 4 months ago. They say, hey, we got to get ahead of it. Well, guess what? That didn't happen. Jeff Grammer tells me he's sitting there. He sees the news of Jon Jones's retirement. And amazingly, as an incredible reporter, says, hey, let me just look up Jon Jones's name, Jonathan Jones, in the Albuquerque police records and see if anything comes up. And voila.
BC. Wow. I mean, this is just outrageous. The way that this reporter this is like an old school reporting movie, the way he just Googled it. How the hell was a crime in Albuquerque, New Mexico, not the biggest place in the world, with their biggest athlete probably to come out of there? How was this able to be buried from February for so long? And how, it just comes out like this? UFC had no idea, surely. Surely there's got to be more to this.
I mean, when Dana was asked Sunday in New York by Oscar Willis, he hadn't known about it. He said it wasn't, from his vantage point, the reason why Jon stepped away. I mean, look, the fact that it wasn't reported to now is certainly, or it wasn't reported until now is certainly weird. I believe part of that report did show that phone records indicated that Jon attempted to call the woman involved in this, who was found pantsless in the passenger seat of her own car, blacked out on mushrooms. and claims Jon Jones left the scene of a crime, which is something he's done before, unfortunately, in Albuquerque. If the phone records match up, it seems likely that he was a part of this. But either way, again, it's like, how weird can a weird situation get? It just feels too close to the timing of him walking away for it not to be somewhat related to this. And it's crazy. I mean, we all have our own timelines in our head of the Jon Jones transgressions and the up and down. But what was it? 2015. I remember saying Jon Jones is two things at once. He's the greatest fighter of all time in this sports history. And he's also the biggest cautionary tale, the biggest what if. Yet, like, here we are. He still got to the finish line of being a 2-division champion, even though his heavyweight title reign is historically hollow at best after the enabling by the UFC. But he's still being linked to this type of activity, just like he was in the pandemic, just like he was the night he got inducted into the Hall of Fame when he reportedly struck his family. I mean, I don't know. It's like Dana was at a loss for words, understandably so. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about the allegations here and the full timeline of Jon's personal life, which has never stopped. I mean, I can remember in particular, after that time he was caught on that pre-fight drug test for cocaine, interviewing him at ESPN the next time he had made the rounds when I worked there in Bristol, Connecticut. And in particular, while I was interviewing, and said, look, you had some big setbacks personally. Are you going to take some, change your lifestyle? Are you going to be looked to running with a new crowd? Are you going to be going to a more Spartan lifestyle of, gym, church, back home with the family? And I remember specifically he looked me in the eye and said, no, I'm not going to change anything. I'm still going to go out with the same people to the same places. I'm just not going to partake in everything they do. Right there, that felt like a huge red flag. And here we are more than a decade later. This was like
a private conversation you guys had in between interviews, or was this on the interview?
It was part of the interview. And I only got to do that interview because he had sworn off Brett Okamoto at the time of ESPN for having, written something critical about him. It's just crazy. It's crazy. The glazing, the enabling, the 2 years of Jon Jones is the number one pound for pound. If you don't believe that, you're an idiot. And all the leverage that they gave to the one guy that they really can't trust. And look what happened. He woke up, whether it's related to that Albuquerque misdemeanor charge, whether it's just, you know what? I don't really have anything left to prove. I'd rather be in Thailand on the back of a motorcycle, rubbing my hands through a curly guy's hair. Hey, Jon, do what you want, but you have wasted all of our time, all of the remaining goodwill we have left for you. And how about the career of Aspinall, the earning power? How about the heavyweight division? How about this brand, this promotion that, for my money is struggling aggressively in 2025, not to make the buck. They got the system set to make that buck hand over hand. But how much more will the UFC fan accept? We don't have super fights. We don't really have superstars. They don't really promote the fights. I just feel like this Jones thing, it has that potential to be the true turning point. Not where people say, F you, I'm not watching the UFC ever again. But what are we doing here? It's never been more expensive. It's never been this. It's never been that. And it's just asleep at the wheel style matchmaking. And here we are. With that said, though, let's go 317 this Saturday. Woohoo. All right.
I know. Well, exactly. It does take away a little bit from that event. And we're still all focused on what's happening. Dana White basically said the fight was done to Oscar Willis at Fanatics. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Did you know about the stuff that came out of Albuquerque last night?
I saw it today. When I saw it today, I said, oh, everybody's going to think this is why he retired. Maybe that is why he retired. Who the hell knows, man? But, yeah, I don't know. These are all questions you got to ask him. We had the fight done. You saw me talking about it very confidently that this fight was going to happen. And then he changed his mind.
Did you know?
The fight was done, BC, except it wasn't. It was never done. He was never going to fight Tom Aspinall. And the funny situation there is just Dana White just laughing when he's like, I saw the news out of Albuquerque. Maybe that's why he retired. Ha, ha, ha. Like it's nothing. But what was your reaction to Dana White sticking to his guns? The fight was done. The fight was done. It was a done deal. What was done? What was done?
I'm going to
Unless
guess.
it's signed, it's not done, right, BC?
I'm going to guess that when Dana says it's done, Jon agreed to do it, which is, probably the reason why they never stripped him, even though historical precedent, whether you're talking about Jermaine Durand to me, Nico Montano, people have been stripped far quicker for far less. I certainly can understand the fighters mentioned here aren't on the same level as the greatest of all time in one of the last remaining pay-per-view draws that the promotion has. I just can't understand the flippance of Dana here. Even when he's asked by Oscar in that same interview, do you think Jon was ducking Aspinall? I was like, no. He just, and that's been the mindset of the UFC psychophant fan who's basically like, why are we complaining here? Jon's the greatest of all time. He can do what he wants. He woke up and decided, you know what? This is no longer for me. I'm stepping away. But I think there's a reason why this retirement was not met with video packages showcasing his incredible 17 years and everything he's accomplished. You got a few of that. You got an ESPN MMA Twitter, putting all his accomplishments out there. UFC said, thank you for what you've done. Everybody else is going, what the hell are we doing the last 2 years? Like, this is one of the more disappointing / embarrassing developments I have ever seen. And in my opinion, it's not only because UFC's in a large degree have sort of their eye off the ball in the TKO era compared to what we expect, at least in the Zuffa era many years ago. But I think even more to trust Jon Jones, to allow that Stipe Miocic fight to go 20 months after Jon defeated Cyril Gane, to go to all this levels of unprecedentedness. Obviously, Dana felt that Jon was going to do it, but Dana often announces fights that aren't signed anyway. So his definition of, it was going to happen, you got to take it with a grain of salt. And anyone trying to say, look, this is just a Jones decision, no one's at fault. Tell that to every heavyweight. Tell that to Tom Aspinall. It's really hard for me to sit here and not point blame at Jon for wasting everybody's time, at UFC for enabling it. And, at the end of the day, nobody wins in this situation. And then, we did have a chance for Dana to be the hero when Ngannou was brought up on the idea of, okay, if we can't have Jones Ngannou or Jones Aspinall, what about Aspinall Ngannou? And then we get the response of, I don't like him. I don't think so. This is where we're at in 2025.
This one right here, BC.
Ngannou or Aspinall?
Francis Ngannou. Yeah, I'm not a fan. I don't. Yeah.
Dream that if it how would you see?
You'll have to play that one out in your head because I don't see that happening. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Who would win?
So BC, I was going to say Jon Jones. I can go through all the incidents here. Like, we've done the shows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The latest one, the last couple. I've got things with PEDs. I've got events canceled. I got events moved. You name it, my friend. I've got it with Jon Jones. Over the history that he's had with the UFC, the man has done it all to Dana White. Make no mistake about it. I'm pretty sure you were sitting in that room with me at UFC 200 when they had to bring Anderson Silva in last second because of what happened with Jon Jones. But Francis Ngannou is the guy that Dana White just cannot forgive. He is the guy that Dana White just doesn't have any interest in. The guy just wanted a nice equitable deal for fighters, a nice deal for himself. How crazy was he to try to negotiate himself a nice deal? How crazy was he, BC? How could he ask for such a thing? How ridiculous is Dana White being about this no-nonsense hate towards Francis Ngannou after him just wanting a fair deal?
He's not a good guy, Dana says. As he said at the press conference after the Baku card, he said Francis says things that, publicly that he doesn't really believe behind the scenes. Dana, I think you have a history of doing exactly that, saying one thing and then doing another. But on top of that, here you are praising Jon Jones on his way out after all of this negativity that happened because of him and because of your enabling. But Jon Jones is a good guy. Conor McGregor is a good guy, but not Francis Ngannou. And while I don't want to make this about Ngannou's character versus any other fighter, because everybody's human at the end of the day, and you could certainly make the argument that Ngannou forced PFL into a deal that they can never get out of. But let's be honest right here. Why is Francis Ngannou persona non grata apparently forever to Dana White? Because Dana's ego. Because UFC had and still has a monopolistic control over their fighters, over these draconian contracts that no other sport has. And what did Francis attempt to do? He attempted to fight for himself and the future. And you can always argue that the things that Francis was asking for were never going to happen under any regime. And you know what? He accomplished what he was trying to do. Francis got to free agency, and then he went elsewhere and made the money that he knew he could make. But to Dana, the reason why Dana has to hate him for life, the reason why Dana has to put his own ego ahead of the company's bottom line, the fan interests, and all of that. Because remember, Dana didn't want to do Mayweather McGregor. TKO did, right? This is sort of that same situation. I'm wondering, like we say often, is it time for Dana to go? Is he getting in the way in certain things? In my opinion, he's 100% getting in the way, telling the public that Francis is not a good guy. Again, why? Because Francis is the only one that challenged Dana and won. He set a precedent that's going to be basically impossible to accomplish again because of how they've even changed the contract rules after Francis exited. But Dana has to hate him for life. Why? Because this is the biggest indictment against this system that UFC has dominated in over the years. But to speak of this system, Dennis, this system gives us all the fights we ever wanted, except for maybe Randy Couture versus Fedor, which was never going to happen because of the co-promotion element in M1. Some people say Brock Fedor, but it's the same thing. And then maybe GSP Anderson Silva, a fight that could have happened. They let the window pass. It didn't happen. To me, it was always, it didn't need to happen. It would have been nice. But you could have previously counted on your hand the amount of times because of that same level of control that the UFC always makes the fights that the fans want. They're the opposite of boxing. Well, here we are in 2025. Now we can add Jones Ngannou, Jones Aspinall, and Ngannou Aspinall to that list. And oh, by the way, on the same weekend that Dana White is promoting the biggest boxing match in 10 years, after spending all those years telling us boxing is all about making all the money you can in one night, going out of business sale, and, you know, all the bad things that they do. I feel like I'm the only one saying this over the last year, but UFC has become boxing. Can we see this now? Can we see this now? I mean, say all you want, Dennis, about Vince McMahon. He's one of the grossest human beings. But when it's about business, you get welcomed back in his house. Because guess what? He's going to win in the end. His fans are going to be happy. He's going to be making the money. Dana White is a boulder, in my opinion, a brand ambassador, as the great Zach Arnold calls him, a boulder whose ego is in the way of some of the things we used to take for granted, like super fights.
Dude, I was going to say the Vince McMahon thing as well. Like, say what you want about Vince. He's a terrible human being, but when it comes to being a promoter, he would bring the guys back no matter what happened. There's only one guy, Macho Man Randy Savage, and we don't need to go into that whole thing, why he didn't bring him back, but the Bret Harts, the CM Punks, whoever it was, the Ultimate Warriors.
Bruno Sammartino, all of these guys.
That at the end of the day, if these guys come back and fight under the banner of the WWE, he's the one who wins. It doesn't matter what his personal history with these guys are. Like, if Francis Ngannou comes back and they offer him, the deal that Francis wants and, this and that, maybe there's a couple of more negotiations there. He's spoken about a couple of things, but if they bring him back, regardless, they would be underpaying him. And regardless, it would be a win for the UFC. It could be two fights with Tom Aspinall. It could be a whole bunch of stuff in the heavyweight division. Alex Pereira hanging around there too. Well,
hold on, Dennis. Guess what happens too if Ngannou comes back and beats Aspinall? Jon Jones gets on the phone and says, I'm ready to come back. I mean, what are we doing here? Wake up.
Just so many possibilities, man. And you get people believing in the heavyweight division once again. Who is the heavyweight champion to you right now, BC? Is it Tom Aspinall or Francis Ngannou?
It's Tom Aspinall. And that's only because Ngannou, completed his journey, which was to get to free agency. Yes, he tried to ask for certain things, whether or not it was ever possible. He left, and that's fine. And even he's coming out on Twitter and being like, cryptically, like, wait, did I really say I'm coming back? Although we did hear publicly from one of his coaches, Eric Nixick, saying that he would like to. We also saw him in the corner of Kamaru Usman recently with UFC cornerman clothing on at the weigh-in. So it's like, he wouldn't have been allowed to do that if it was really the hatred that we believe here, but it's enough of a hatred to put business on the back shelf and put, and put grudges first. And how they can knowingly do this when they're literally in the midst of trying to triple their valuation and get a combined new broadcasting deal that they hope will pay them more than $1 billion a year. Yet Conor McGregor was supposed to fight last year and had a broken toe. We never saw him again. Now Jon Jones is retired. They're not paying the money like they used to in the past to push people forward and make them, on the standpoint of public knowledge, the next crossover stars. And you're going to try to triple your yearly valuation while also slipping in. We're going to do double the Dana White Contender Series cards next year. It's like, look at the direction we're going in the TKO era. I don't want to be one of these people, Dennis, who is always like, well, in 2016, covering the UFC and being a fan was the greatest thing ever. And by the way, it was. And there were a lot of other great years too. But I really don't understand, unless you only came to the UFC as a fan post-pandemic, unless maybe you completely identify with the very aggressive sort of political involvement that the UFC has, where, hey, you don't care if you're paying $1,000 to go to the UFC. You don't care who's fighting. You just want to be a part of that. Outside of that, how anybody could see today's product, see the lack of connective tissue and storytelling, see any of that, and be like, this is the MMA I fell in love with. It's not. And to me, that's the bigger story here than even Jon Jones's, issues outside, or Jon Jones walking away after 2 years. There's a few of us that have been banging the drum on top of the mountain going, we got a problem here. We're going in the wrong direction. And I don't know what it's going to take for everybody else to wake up or for a real turning point to happen. Maybe it's them not getting the deal they want. Maybe at some point TKO goes, look, we've taken enough money out of this sport. Let's go flip it to somebody in the Middle East or something. But I want my UFC back. Am I alone in saying this? I want my UFC back, right? Like, my job depends on the popularity here.
You're not at all. I remember UFC 200 weekend, we were sitting with Luke Thomas, and it was like a title main event. I think it was RDA and Eddie Alvarez for the lightweight title, UFC title. And we were all like, oh man, we're so tired. Like, oh, can't believe we have to be here for an extra card. Cut to 2025. That would be like probably like a lightweight main event for a title. How often do you see that? Once a year? We're about to see it at International Fight Week. We're going to talk about that later as well, because we might not see it for a while, depending what happens this weekend. But let me quickly bring this up with you, BC, before we move on from the heavyweight division. People wondering what's next for Tom Aspinall. And of course, if you look at the heavyweight rankings, you can't take away the fact that there are a number of contenders there that might deserve it. People are talking about Cyril Gane potentially slotting in there, Almeida potentially slotting in there. But what do you think about Sean Strickland, the matchmaker, and his idea of a potential Alex Pereira-Tom Aspinall fight? Just make it happen. Just give it to the fans. If we're going to the gas station, we want that good slop, that slop that makes us full. Maybe this is a good way to launch Tom Aspinall as the heavyweight champion. Do you think we just throw Alex Pereira in there to kick things off? Where do you sit on what's next for Tom Aspinall?
I wouldn't do it, even though I'm outright telling you there's a gaping hole here that needs to be filled. That's why I would even mention the name Francis Ngannou. I thought Dana, even if Dana has no want to bring back Francis, I thought he should have at least planted that seed for fan goodwill, but we don't do that anymore. The reason why I don't want this now is because there is unfinished business for Poatan at 205 pounds. This immediate rematch that we assume is coming next against Ankalaev. And on top of that, look, was Poatan 100% in that fight? No. Has he won previous fights not being 100%? Taking fights on, 2 weeks notice to save the UFC? Yes. But you can't do that all the time and come out on top. I think for his career arc, for that division, you need to run that one back. Should Poatan win that, I don't have any issue with the idea of him looking to become the first 3-division champion in UFC history. But I don't want it to come directly off of a humbling loss to Ankalaev, right? Even though I'm telling you, I believe the injury was part of it. Let's get back in there a second time. Let's prove it. Now, that doesn't answer any question of like, what do we have left in the cupboard at heavyweight? We don't. That's not fully a UFC Dana White, Sean Shelby issue. That's global MMA in general at heavyweight. But let me remind you, we could have had Jones, Ngannou, and Aspinall the last, 5 years or so, alternating fights against one another, and we don't. I don't love the Cyril Gane fight. He got handled by Jon Jones 2 years ago in such a humbling manner. He's not coming off a fight that he looked like a killer or a winner his last time out. But, could they slide in Jailton Almeida? They could. There's nobody on that roster right now that gets you excited, that gets you moving. But considering it's not Tom Aspinall's fault. And considering he's had to basically press pause on his career, I really wouldn't mind if they rolled him out every 3 months. If they overpaid him, if they paid money to promote and get him out there, if they basically said, this is the reason Jon Jones walked away. Like, let's spin this man forward. And it's the old Triple G booking. If you remember the run of Gennady Golovkin as the middleweight champion in boxing in his prime, none of the big names would fight him. So his management team, HBO, the American cable company, they just said, look, he's going to fight 4 times a year against whoever is available. I think that's where you have to go right now for Aspinall. He fights. When he does fight, he tends to finish people early. Let's just keep putting him out there. Let's give him a chance to become a star and make the money he was supposed to in this run in the last couple of years.
He's going to be the NWA Ric Flair defending champion, just going from territory to territory and fighting names like Spivak, Topuria, Acosta. BC, what are you on about? No one wants to see a rematch with Alex Pereira and Ankalaev. Give the guy the heavyweight thing. We don't need to see it. We got Yuri, we got Khalil, we got Olberg, we got the boys.
I'd rather Yuri move up. Yuri's not in a title fight right now at 205. I'd rather you go, okay, how about we just have Yuri move up? Like, I'm not against stuff like that, but you can't give a guy...
He's in the university. He's studying. But, dude, what if he loses to Ankalaev the way that he lost the first time again, Pereira? Then you lose the little remainder of heat that we got left.
Do you want to I mean, it comes down to this. Do you want to advertise somebody attempting to do what I always felt was the Holy Grail, to become the first 3-division, not just UFC champion, but major MMA champion? And I throw in the asterisk of 1 championship and in Malakin, who, you know, did do that technically, but with their rehydration clauses, it messes everything up. To become the first one, that's the type of thing I expected a BJ Penn, a Conor McGregor to attempt. I think Poatan is that dude that should get special treatment to try that. But I don't love doing it after a loss in which he was handled and didn't look good. I mean,
fans didn't watch that fight. They don't know what happened to him. They need something, BC. We got to give it to him. Let me ask you this. What do you think what will be the better fan reaction if we do a Pereira fight or if we do a gun fight next? What do you think,
Pereira.
fans?
Certainly Pereira. Certainly.
I mean, I feel like maybe we could slot Khalil. I think Ankalaev is I think we just have to reside to the fact Ankalaev is going to be the reigning champion at 205 for a while. Do you agree? It's not going to he's not going to go anywhere. Well, got Khalil.
I hate to disrespect the man because he finally put forth just a really good, thorough performance at the top level, but he is what we playfully like to say, first team all donk on Morning Combat, meaning if there's a way to figure out a way to lose a fight he shouldn't in some weird way, he might be that guy. And that's just elite MMA in general, by the way. You can lose at any time to anyone. I get what you're saying there. I don't want it. I don't want Poatan in there right now. I'd rather Ankalaev, if he beat Poatan, then put him up at heavyweight against him. I know that's not sexy.
Ankalaev?
I'm trying to retain some level.
Now you're out of control. You know what your problem is? You're out of control. That's
the whole thing's out of control. The whole thing is right now. It's good. It's
the whole system's out of control, man. This whole system's out of control. You know what else was out of control? Dana White trying to do a face-off in boxing and in typical UFC style almost had a heart attack when Crawford and Canelo went at it. Have a look at this. BC, we're talking about Dana White, Zuffa Boxing. Before we talk about the negatives, there's production value, there's timing value, there's things the UFC do well with their broadcasts that we absolutely cannot stand about boxing. People are having 5 interest songs and then we go to the back and they're still warming up and you're like, dude, you got to be kidding me. What are some of the benefits do you think that Zuffa Boxing can actually bring to my internet cuts out? Are you still there?
Yeah. I'm still here.
What do you think some of the benefits are that Zuffa Boxing can actually bring to a UFC broadcast?
Well, look, I happened to have the unique experience last fall of going to Dublin and calling a fight with a boxing match with Callum Walsh, one of Dana's young prospect that he's taken a liking to out of Ireland. But the key part of that is, I believe in hindsight, that was sort of a proof of concept, a warm up to show that if UFC takes the top level production crew that they have for the MMA pay-per-views and put it into boxing, what could it look like? I have to say, I enjoyed it. That is a top shelf production team. So what can we expect on the value of something like what a Dana White can bring to this massive super fight that isn't going on pay-per-view for $100. It's going on Netflix, which, you know, is becoming a global power and certainly is the number one spot for US media and television from the standpoint of how can you put it in front of the most eyeballs. You're going to get that aggressive top shelf production. You're going to get, and we saw that on Sunday's press conference, a flash, a spark of the old Dana, meaning he's promoting something he's actually excited about. He's not just going through the motions, which is really what it has looked like the last year and a half to 2 years. And then, you know, the more you know about how much Hunter Campbell's taking over behind the scenes, you begin to question what is Dana's true role there. But overall, look, there's going to be a lot of pressure on what we're calling now Zuffa Boxing. TKO would have been a much more understandable name, but look, Dana has to make sure Zuffa Boxing never dies, and there's part of me that does respect him, you know, keeping those T-shirts around and saying one day we will name it this weird Italian name that actually has more to do with the former owners of the UFC, but whatever at this point. I think the pressure's on them for a few reasons. One of those is the stadium. I've been arguing for years that UFCs should schedule at least once, maybe even twice a year when the matchup dictates it, or let's say the fighter's home area dictates it in terms of passion, to take fights that are above the normal level of pay-per-view main events that maybe are creeping up on, you know, super fights like what we thought Jones Aspinall would have been, like what I believe Ilia versus Islam will one day become, and put those in stadiums, not because it is a perfect viewing experience for the guy in the 88th row up there in the 6th deck. It's because it's a cultural event. It's a flex. When English boxing does that, when Anthony Joshua fights in front of 90,000 in an outdoor soccer stadium, or Ben and Eubank earlier this year, that's a party you want to be at looking through the screen. So I actually hope in some weird way that if things go well for Dana here, that they go really well production-wise, that he believes that he presented a stadium show that had pomp, circumstance, regalness to it, excitement, that he comes out of there going, all right, guys, like I said, no women would fight in the UFC. I said we'd never do a fight in a stadium. I was wrong, right? I was wrong. I hope it leads into that. But really, let's be honest here. The TKO takeover has a lot of tentacles, right? When they are coming to your city and they're bundling these packages where you can go to WWE one night and UFC the next night and PBR the next night and maybe boxing and slap after that, the tentacles run wide. When young Callum Walsh scored a big win in boxing, they'll bring him to Monday Night Raw. I think the biggest thing Dana / Zuffa / TKO brings to this fight and for Turki Al-Sheikh in the future is reach. There's certainly a cool factor when Dana's involved in something. There's a certain part of the population that are going to support it no matter what. But how about the fact that WWE social, UFC social, everything else TKO social is blasting out constantly Canelo Crawford material, live press conference. Oh, by the way, we pulled Max Kellerman out from the dead and brought him back. I mean, there are elements to this that are exciting. Let me separate any ill feelings I have toward Dana White in his performance in MMA over the last couple of years. Dana White, as a carnival barker, has a proven record. When he's dialed in and passionate about something that's worth being passionate about, it's electric. It makes you want to be involved. I think that's something that we've been missing in boxing since maybe the prime days of Don King and, you know, these larger than life. I mean, we've got promoter personalities in boxing, Eddie Hearn, Oscar De La Hoya, what have you, but nothing like this. So whether or not this fight ends up feeling like a super fight or looking like one, it's got a lot of historical precedence. It's got a lot of star power in it. And look, I've wanted to see for years, what would it look like if Dana went all in on boxing? This is, you know, the best case scenario for him because he doesn't have to pay for it. Saudi's paying for it. Will they make it? That's a whole nother question. But for just this one night, September 13th, and just this build, they do bring a lot to the table, a lot of gravitas, a lot of reputation. And I think big production is a big part of that.
For us, it's an indecent proposal, a boxing indecent proposal. For one night, maybe we can accept it. But for lifetime, BC, you're more in tune with the boxing world. You've been there for some of the biggest moments. Here in Australia and New Zealand, Boxing is in the bloodstream of all the supporters. They do pay-per-view here on a Wednesday night. It draws big money. We sell out arenas and sometimes stadiums with local names. Cambosis, for example, is someone that sold out massive venues here. Eddie Hearn has...
Jeff Horn, put some respect on that name.
Jeff Horn, Manny Pacquiao, that was a huge one. We have a history of boxing in this country. You have a history of boxing in your country. The UK has a history of boxing there. It was always a number of promoters working together. And while broadcasts didn't look smooth by any means, and fights sometimes did not get made, and sometimes sus stuff did happen, there was a sort of beauty to things when things did come together. There was also a beauty in the carnival sort of situation of what happened behind the scenes in boxing, and the deals, the handshakes, the mobs, all sorts of crazy stories involved, right? Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, what really happened there? No one still knows. My question to you is, with the UFC coming in, putting in their pay structure, taking away some of that magic, making people sign to them long-term, taking away some of these promoters out of the game. I mean, Turkey's funding it right now, but he's been funding all these other promoters overseas. Kind of killed off boxing a little bit in America, right? In other parts of the world, because we couldn't really watch it live. It was happening over there. What do you think the UFC, Zuffa Boxing, what kind of damage do you think it actually do to the culture of boxing, to boxing as we know it, especially for the fighters too, right? Because that Muhammad Ali, the deal, the fact that you're going to get what you deserve, that goes out the window eventually as well.
I mean, one of the biggest things that, even though they haven't said this is their ambition, I think if you're smart enough to realize them wanting, Zuffa Boxing wanting to change the Muhammad Ali Act and use their political connections to do that, it's not just to be able to put out their own titles and not have to deal with the sanctioning bodies, which are a headache unto themselves to begin with. It's also one of the key parts of the Muhammad Ali Act, the Boxing Reform Act, was to bring in transparency, meaning if I'm a fighter and I fight in a pay-per-view, I am under law supposed to get a breakdown of how much money was made, where did all the money go, right? This was to stop the old way, the old late 70s, early 80s, Don King, Bob Arum controlled boxing, where it felt like the fighters were always the ones getting screwed. So first and foremost, they're wanting to remove that. In the idea, like, they're showing you their cards in a way. They don't want to work with others. They want it to all be behind their large fences and basically try to recreate that UFC model in boxing. Do I look at that as a positive? Do I look at that as a healthy change, even though the sport admittedly is a shit show on the regular? Let's be very fair. It's our shit show though, right? So don't get too harsh on it, but it is. It's part of what we love about it. It's part of what we hate about it. I don't think Dana, Zuffa, and Turkey together as an evil empire team are that unifying force. And if they were able to become that, I think you're bringing more negative than positive, particularly first and foremost to fighter rights, financial rights, all of that stuff, the contracts that just keep you tied down for life. Really, if we're really being honest in boxing history, the last couple of decades, Al Heyman, the very silent, very mysterious manager / de facto promoter, I think he really changed boxing in a big way for the fighters, right? When he launched PBC and getting them paid more, teaching Floyd Mayweather how to be the star. We're really down to the point where Floyd's controlling the prices of the t-shirts and the hot dogs and the vending because they eliminated middlemans to puff up the fighter. Some drawbacks with that, but seeing the fighters taken care of in boxing is always first and foremost in such a gnarly sport a good thing. Also, you never hear a fighter say anything bad about Al Heyman because of that. So am I nervous about this big takeover? Yes. Do I think it's going to be successful? At this point, no, because I think there's a unanswered question on how they're going to merge their two visions, meaning one vision is they would put forth upwards of 4 big time events on Netflix every year with Turkey's money and bringing their powers together. That's Canelo Crawford. That probably will succeed under, no matter, because it's just such a big fight. But then they want to launch the Prospect League. They want to break down boxing's foundation, build it back up with their control, and tell everybody else to kick sand. Unless Turki Al-Sheikh is going to be in this for at least a decade, not for another 12 or 18 months until his country says, I think we've spent enough in boxing. Let's go back to soccer. We got the World Cup coming up. Let's go back to soccer. If you're telling me you see a crystal ball and Turkey's going to still be here in 10 years and Saudi Arabia is going to be funding them so aggressively, then what they still need, in my opinion, to merge those two plans together are fighters, a stable. They need to buy out one of the 5 major power promoters, in my opinion, whether that's Eddie Hearn or whomever, just so they can build a foundation. Because Dana, again, in Turkey, have telegraphed what they want to do. They want to have their own titles. They don't want to work with anybody else. You're either with them or you're against them. You're not going to get there unless you have the fighters that will bring the fans in to believe that your belts are legit and not just homemade belts. And who are these fighters going to fight against? How are you going to recruit the other fighters to come in? You better guarantee that Turkey's bankroll is still going to be here, and you better quickly acquire a lot of names. At the rate they're at right now, they don't seem to have anybody under contract. Could that change? Could Canelo Crawford be a big tipping point in that direction if that thing is a monster success and shatters viewing records? That's what they're already calling it. They're calling it a potential fight to be the most watched fight in the history of combat sports, because of how good Jake Paul and Mike Tyson did viewership-wise. They're basically saying if that was a clown show and this is the real deal, what else could it be? Look, if they do, 90 million people live, which, by the way, was the same exact amount that watched Leon Speaks to Muhammad Ali live on ABC back in the late 70s in the States, and is sort of looked at as like the holy crap, remember boxing was that like that? It could still be like that again. If they do something like that, they'll have momentum, but they can't take over the sport unless they have the control of the fighters. And what young to old, what active fighter today that's already been making some money is going to be willing to change into a system where they're losing that leverage and losing control? Yes, you can float big stacks of cash to people in the beginning, and they're doing that. Canelo's rumored to be making $250 million for this fight. Crawford's rumored to be making $100 million. Turkey said publicly, this is the biggest contract in combat sports history. Even if it's half of that, even if it's a third of that, this is not what UFC fighters are used to. I really doubt that this thing does work. And the biggest reason is how long is Turkey going to be in this, in my opinion, my question. But I do think there's a lot of pressure on Dana Zuffa to come out and land that plane in a big way come September 13th. But there's a reason, Dennis, why so many big names, Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson, how many big names, Evander Holyfield, have come into boxing thinking they're going to be not just a promoter, the next big promoter. And some of those people have had a lot of money behind them. Part of the reason why we love and hate this sport, it's broken nature. It's, everybody fighting for themselves and not for the health of the sport. That's not going to help, in my opinion, Dana and Turkey get there. And I also think if you're Turkey Al-Sheikh, you've made some major mistakes in your year and a half, 2 years leading up to this point. They put boxing on a DAZN app that nobody in America has unless they're a hardcore boxing fan. None of these fights got put on national television to the masses. So it's still, after all this pro-Riyadh season, we're here, all this, no one's watching these fights that aren't boxing fans. So Netflix is certainly that door that takes you to the mainstream, that takes you to the casuals. But they better come big in September. They better nail it if they want to have the momentum to lead to this becoming a full-time regular thing.
Canelo might be making more money for this one fight than the entire UFC roster for a calendar year. I was going to say...
It's insane. It really is.
But it's interesting, though. In boxing, it's all about the names. It's always the two names at the top of the card. The UFC is about the brand at the top of the card. And I believe their plan is probably have Zuffa Boxing coming to a town near you, blah, 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 unknown fighters, but it's Zuffa Boxing. They go into that city, they get the broadcast deal, then they get, the money from the local government, and then they get the big gate, and it's franchising, man. It's like opening a McDonald's in a small town. Boom, 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 without actually what boxing is all about, which is the draws. It's always been the science of the draw. How can we have the two draws at the top that make us enough money, but then at the same time, they're making the money as well? And I think there's a beauty there between the fans and the fighter, where everybody wants to kind of see those guys make that money. That's the dream. You make shit money at the start to make your millions at the top. It's just crazy to see the UFC kind of being like, nah, we want to do this franchise thing with boxing. I wonder if it's going to work out. Just quickly, BC, I want to get your thoughts on UFC 317 very, very quickly, but boxing is feeling very sterile. You know what else is sterile? Your balls after you use MANSCAPED. MANSCAPED, of course, .com/submission. 15% off with a code word submission. That is the Chairman Pro right there. One of the best tools you can use. The electric face shaver can tackle up to 5 days of growth. Features 2 interchangeable blade heads. It's waterproof. It's got beautiful battery life, travel lock, LED spotlight, comes with a 2-year Manscaped warranty. And if you buy one today or use the code word submission on Manscaped right now, you get 15% off any product and you help the show. Jump on right now. Also, SAILY. SAILY is the eSIM that keeps you connected wherever you go. So easy to use. You just download the app, put the amount that you need on there, and you're sorted wherever you are around the world. People have asked me about how you can stay connected, whether you go to America, Asia, wherever you want to go, and not have to spend tons of money on a new SIM card or plans, local plans. SAILY is your solution. Use the code word submission for 15% off to new subscribers. You just top up the data that you need. You can use it wherever you go. It's all just a downloaded app. You don't have to take out your SIM card. It really is a lifesaver. SAILY.com/submission. And those links are in the description below. And of course, as well, BC, while I'm talking about great things, what about this? I want to have a shout out to our friends at MK who have some new merch here. Look at that. That is the June exclusive merch, skits and bits right there. The signed Mortal Kombat, Beavis and Butthead sold out, but we got news drops every single month. Average Joe Art, I believe, BC, doing a fantastic job. You, Luke, doing a great job as well. And of course, there's some OG things too. For people that just want to have the OG stuff, of course, that donk shirt must have. The hoodies right now, freezing in Australia. Get those, the tees, the beanie, the hat. It's all happening on the merch. Congratulations to you and Luke Thomas for investing and figuring out a way where you guys can actually make some of the money. People don't realize there's all these companies that'll do it for you and you make like cents on a dollar. Yes. I'm so happy for you guys, man. Congratulations. And the July merch is dropping when? At the start of the next month?
Yeah, the first of our first episode of the July month, which I believe will be Thursday, July 3rd, because of the American holiday, 4th of July.
Beautiful. All right, so before we wrap up, UFC 317 this weekend, BC, I've got to get your thoughts, man, because Ilia Topuria already talking about his plans on leaving the lightweight division and moving to welterweight. Have a listen to this.
Islam becomes the welterweight world champion. For sure, I'm going to push for that shot also, and I will move to the welterweight division.
BC, this man has just left featherweight to go to lightweight. We were just talking about how, was this the right decision for him? Should they have done this? Should he really be fighting for the lightweight belt? Maybe we can forgive it because Conor McGregor has done it. He's already talking about leaving a new division to go up to welterweight. What was your reaction when you saw the man already planting seeds before he even got the lightweight belt around his waist?
Look, I've come around to Ilia's methods, and some of that is the timing right now. We just spent all that time talking about another UFC star going away and Jon Jones. Will Conor McGregor ever fight again? Who are the household names in MMA right now? Well, they're all retired for the most part. I used to get upset when Ilia would do things like change his Twitter bio to champion before the fight even happened. I'm realizing now he is a special individual. Maybe I don't want to see him nude like Luke Thomas does, but what I really see here is the star that we might need right now. And the fight, the one that I was hoping would have happened this weekend, Ilia versus Islam, 1 versus 2 pound for pound. Remember, this is not a super fight in which you need to pull somebody out of retirement or what have you. These are two guys in the midst of their prime. Makhachev obviously further and a little bit older, but Topuria is the defending fighter of the year coming off of knockouts of 2 pound for pound ranked legends. I kind of love this. I don't necessarily fear is he overlooking Oliveira, even though he's a 4-1 betting favorite. That's going to be a very difficult fight. We all know that, okay? We've only seen Topuria at this division one time in his 16-fight pro career. But I believe this rivalry and the build to it, we don't normally get multi-year build to UFC super fights because of the promotion's control. When something comes around the corner and it's time, they freaking make it. This, to me, is sort of like the life preserver thrown into the pool that's just been, tainted after Jon Jones got out of it before the Aspinall fight. I absolutely love the idea of, if he does get this done, say, hey, Makhachev, you can't outrun me. You can go all the way up to heavyweight. I want to fight you. Now, I'm not siding with Topuria in the back and forth trash talk here. Makhachev's 33. He wanted to become a 2-division champion. Would have I have loved if he had stayed around and fought Ilia first? Absolutely. But how about the fact that Ilia is telling us he's willing to chase? Look, if he wins the lightweight title and if he stops Charles Oliveira, Put the rocket ship on him. He's already, on
We're
the
gonna do
verge
it.
of-
We're gonna move him up to. There's all these contenders and lightweight and welterweight. No, we're doing it. We're going
Look,
for it.
The same thing you said, the same argument you said about
Is this the
Poatan going
Pereira
up to
thing
heavyweight
biting me in
now
the ass?
because
Biting me
we
in the
need
ass.
it. I didn't like the details on that one. I love the details on this one because it's two guys in their absolute prime, the two best in the sport. They don't like each other. It's brewing up. There's a rivalry between Georgia and Dagestan that's growing here. Everything about this is perfect. Let it happen. If he wins it, call that man out. In UFC, you better be making video packages to start to plant those seeds right now. Let's stir this up. Are we allowed? Are we allowed to have a generational fight we can get excited for? Let's stir this thing up. Okay?
What happens to lightweight? Okay. So I'm going to quickly get your prediction before we wrap in it just a minute, because I know you got to get going, get going. But what happens if he wins the lightweight belt? And then what happens if he wins the welterweight belt? What, those divisions, and then he's just going to disappear? Like
No,
the champion, he's not defending the welterweight belt BC
Well,
against
obviously-
Kamaru Usman.
Yeah,
He's
obviously
not
he'll
defending
just
the
fight
lightweight belt
Mayweather.
against Armin.
Obviously, he'll just box Mayweather and launch his own whiskey line and then start knocking out patrons to really do the No, here, look, dude, at that point, those are problems you want to have, right? Don't you
The
want
champion of 3 divisions just saying see you later, and the heavyweight division champion going bye.
All right, I'm not saying see you later. All I'm saying is this: if you've got a chance to do somebody going for the 3 division championship for the first time, and it's that guy on the launch pad that he's on, and if he goes through Oliveira on day 1 of a new division to do that, yeah, call out Makhachev. And even though that welterweight division is deep and there's a lot of people deserving, I'm not saying you have to do that next. But let's begin to bang that drum because Topuria is coming. He's not going anywhere. He wants to be the biggest star of all time. Give him that chance to do that. Let's go.
Jed, by the way, one of the 3 dirtbags wanted to know, how's BC handling the fact the UFC failed to deliver the two fights he wanted this year? Jon Jones and Aspinall. Islam Makhachev, oh no, he's shrinking. And Topuria. Those are the 2 fights. Have they failed, BC?
Yes, they're failing me, Dennis. They're failing me, and it's more than just fandom. I feed my kids on the success of the UFC, but even though their money is not down, clicks are down, pay-per-views are down, ratings are down. They didn't give me what I wanted, so the only thing, Jed, I can cling to now is the hope of Ilia Islam. Thank you very much.
BC is down as well. Final question, man. People are saying Charles Oliveira is going to get destroyed by they're saying Charles Oliveira is going to get destroyed by Ilia Topuria. Are they underestimating someone that's been a champion, someone that's been in there with the best of the best? Is there a chance Charles can sort of turn things around here and beat Ilia Topuria this weekend? UFC?
Oh, God, there's a great chance. There's an absolute great chance. Even though he's
kind of
35.
feels like a Kamaru Usman Buckley situation when I look at the odds for this one.
Well, I mean, I really gave Usman not a lot of chance in that, and he proved me wrong on there. But I think Oliveira's got a much better chance than even that. Yes, he's 35. Yes, he's 2-2 in his last 4. But split decision loss to Saryukin when he had the choke in there in the final second. And then obviously we know that aberration, he likes to call it, the worst night of his career against Makhachev. Outside of that, he's still very dangerous. He's got the most submissions, the most finishes, can finish you on his back, which we know Topuria can wrestle and can put him there, or obviously on his feet. He takes big chances. And of all the UFC fighters, Oliveira might be the best at operating under chaos. So he's very much a live dog in this one. It's not going to be an easy task, but should we favor Topuria? Yeah, we should, Dennis. And I think you know that.
Can I ask you just before we wrap up, did you notice over, I don't know how much you can see on my screen, but this is an interview with Shaq that Ilia did. Did you notice over his eye? What is that? Like, is that a recent stitch
It looks
up?
like a cut. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that looks very recent. I don't remember seeing that from previous interviews. Not a good spot to have.
If I'm Oliveira, I target that. Do you remember the one thing I'll give Oliveira credit for? Remember the Poirier fight? Oliveira takes him down. He's putting his hands over his mouth. He's messing with his breathing. He's just fighting old school favela gnarly. You got to bring that spirit against Topuria in this one. Let's go.
That's it. All right, there he is. You got the big pre-game coming up. You, Luke, Chuck.
Yeah.
For this one, UFC 317, the 3 legends. Make sure to check that out. Morning Combat, of course, your own personal channel, the Brian Campbell experience. You guys have, you have so many great streams, interviews. What's coming up on that? You got a few of the boys from UFC 317 popping on there as well?
I don't due to time constraints, but I'm always got fresh stuff popping from Shakur Stevenson, the great boxer, coming on to Ben the Bane Davis this week. I mean, that guy's going to be on MTV's Challenge coming up. What the heck
Yes.
are we doing right here?
Yes.
What did Oscar Willis knock out of him? We got to talk about this. Tune into the BCX. There you go.
Love it. Love it. There he is, BC. Appreciate you joining me. Crazy times in the sport. But look, things to talk about at the very least. Thanks for joining me here on Submission Radio.